we don't see each other until who knows when? Next slide, maybe? Anything you want to clarify?
Dharma. What's the Dharma?
What?
Dharma.
What's Dharma?
Oh no, I'm just shocked by the question.
Have we covered it?
Dharma is what you've been hearing. It's just the Tibetan, it's a Sanskrit word meaning, suppose, spiritual path. Whatever we're talking here, this is called Dharma. Dharma is a Sanskrit word that I don't know what it means actually. Technically, I don't know what it means. No, it's an equivalent in Buddhist terms. It's an equivalent of spiritual practice. Your Dharma practice, your spiritual practice, the equivalent. So the Dharma, they often talk about the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. The Dharma is the teachings, the spiritual teachings. The simplest way to put it. So everything we're talking here, this is Buddhist Dharma.
Okay.
That's all, the way the word's used. You know? Okay. What else? Vicky.
You haven't touched too much the connection between the human realm, sentient beings realm, and let's call it the physical scientific world. You know, like we are part of everything that exists. In our bodies, I don't know. The world, for sure, if you look outside, is intelligent. It's working by laws which has some kind of intelligence. Is there any consciousness of the world? The stars, the mountains, the sky,
No, the Buddhist,
energy,
I understand. Like we've been talking, I understand. Like we've been talking, the Buddhist explanation of all this is just matter. It's the four elements. And what causes it to take the shapes that it does is the collective karma, the actions of individual, countless billions of sentient beings throughout space and time. It's the manifestation of our karma. But no, it's got its own laws, but it's inert. Consciousnesses and actions, virtuous actions cause the elements to manifest as beautiful and peaceful and sweet. Non-virtuous actions cause the elements to manifest as suffering. So therefore, even different realms of existence. Hell beings, their manifestation of, the elements manifesting as intense suffering. Spirits, gods, humans, animals. The elements are just physical matter, and what gives them shape, and as you call it, intelligence. The Buddha would say they don't have intelligence. What causes them to behave the way they do is the karma of the sentient beings who live among them. It's literally one of the ways sentient beings' actions manifest.
So there's no point of talking about stars, galaxies, matter, energy as separate from human perception of those, which gives them this shape.
There are detailed descriptions in Buddhist literature of the physical universe, they're their characters. But their relationship to minds is complete, because it's minds. You see, if you're a Christian or a Jew, God made it, I presume, isn't it? God created the universe, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, if you're a Jewish, yes.
That's what I'm saying. So the same with the Muslims. All the Muslims say the world is so amazing, there has to be an architect, they say. That's where the God comes in. The materialists only see the physical, so they're trying to work out the meaning of the universe looking at the physical, right? You agree? You agree?
Yeah.
So the Buddhists would say there are consciousnesses, and every millisecond of whatever consciousnesses do, and there are trillions of them throughout space, and every one of those consciousnesses has their own set of the four elements. So what minds do impacts upon the elements in turn, which impacts upon the external universe, which literally creates the universe the way it appears. So there are laws, it is physical, but they're the manifestation of actions by minds over eons and eons and eons of time.
So they are manifestation of consciousness, actually?
They exist, but the shape and form, okay.
I tell you why I ask it. I will ask you. Like, we are all endless consciousnesses. And when we get to the, to the point when we are having fully developed, we are part of one big consciousness?
No.
No.
Not like that. They don't talk like that. Well, no, okay, Tiki, you could talk like that. Let me just explain. Say the Buddhist word. Okay. That's another discussion though, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is another discussion now, isn't it? Another question.
From the previous question?
From the previous one. Completely different question now, yeah? You happy with the first one?
For me, it has, the previous one has been answered.
Okay, good. So the second one, there are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of individual mind streams, all doing their own trip, all creating our own suffering, all creating our own virtue, all creating our own happiness, all creating our own universes. I mean, although it sounds cosmic, over a long time, kind of karmic evolution, So there are sentient beings who, due to negativity, are experiencing literally what they call hell. But as Lama Yeshe said, hell is not some place separate from us that the devil is waiting saying, ha ha, where is Lama Yeshe? But hell is the manifestation of the negative energy of that sentient being. The spirits are sentient beings who, due to craving and grasping, have intense craving and suffering of never receiving, and incredible suffering types of rebirths and constant attachment and rushing around from pillar to post. Animals have the manifestation of gross bodies or tiny little bodies with intense suffering and ignorance. Humans have the manifestation of gross bodies, indeed, looking like a bunch of animals, but fortunately access to our virtue. And then there are God realms, or like what heaven, but they're also the result of virtue. They're all in samsara, the Buddhist view of samsara, and the Buddhist explanation of the mind and the universe all fits in all of this. So when there are all these billions of sentient beings that are separate, but when you've become completely enlightened, remove all delusions and realize emptiness and perfected your realization of emptiness, and your mind now, with infinite bodhicitta, you become a Buddha, your consciousness pervades the universe, there's nowhere your mind isn't, it's completely perfect, completely, infinitely compassionate. And when Paros becomes a Buddha, it's the same. So you could argue then there's no separate Buddha mind. You could argue then your mind is Buddha and his mind is Buddha, but you kind of don't bump into each other in the sky, you know. But it's not as if there's one big cosmic consciousness and we all kind of join. You become Buddha, I become Buddha, so you know everything and I know everything. There's no separation. And because also at that level, pure Buddha actually refers to the pure consciousness. It doesn't need a body. But it will manifest in billions of forms throughout universes for the sake of others. And all those will be individual little Buddhas, you know, looking like dogs and rats and humans and God knows what. They're individual, but they're all coming from the same mind, your mind. And he's manifesting in his forms to benefit his sentient beings. But they're all manifestations of Buddha mind. And effectively you could argue there's one Buddha. Effectively you could argue. But billions of manifestations. Do you understand?
Yeah.
That's the way they talk.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
You were referring to do not harm, do not kill, do not hurt someone. I can call all those that intentionally cause any harm to anyone of themselves. But why sex? Why rock and roll? There are things that, for my opinion, bring joy.
That's right, precisely, we do. No, of course we do. That's our way of getting pleasure. This is Buddha's explanation of the second kind of suffering, which is hard to see. Basically, all he's saying is, the way we get... Okay, there's a word called pleasure. There's a word called happiness, joy, bliss. These are all different words in English that refer to good feelings, basically, and there are degrees of good feelings, aren't there? That's called happiness. You're right. There's not a single thing wrong with happiness. Buddha would say, I'm giving you methods, people, to get happiness all the time. Do you see what I'm saying? Our mind has the potential to be blissful all the time. So happiness is perfect. Happiness is joy. Happiness is good feelings. And it's got a very technical meaning in Buddhism. So every millisecond you have happy feelings. This is what's interesting. Buddha's saying we've got the wrong interpretation of what causes it. So here we are in a samsaric realm of existence with a body that is a junkie for, it's basically a body of the five senses, isn't it?
Yes.
And the senses in their nature, we have attachment which craves the satisfaction of those senses. Would you accept that?
Yes.
Well, Buddha says that's the problem. It's all we know. We don't know anything outside that, so we just assume it's normal. But basically, the attachment mind within us, the neediness, the craving, is like a junkie.
Okay.
Right? So it craves to get pleasure with the ears, with each of the senses to be satisfied. So the point is, of course it triggers good feelings. There's no argument there. But so let's listen to the Buddha's explanation of what's really happening. Actually, Buddha says, every millisecond of the day, if you tracked your day internally, one of the always present, as they call it in Buddhist psychology, this always present state of mind is one that's called feeling. And it refers to either a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or an indifferent feeling. And every millisecond of the day, we're going to have one of those. So sometimes for 5 minutes, you might have very pleasant feelings. And then you're going to get a headache. You're going to have 10 minutes or 4 days of very unpleasant feelings. Would you agree with this?
Yes.
So we can track our day in terms of, forget the neutral feelings. We've got pleasant and unpleasant. Would you agree? So we know ourselves, we desperately want the nice ones, don't we?
Yes.
And that's what we call happiness, isn't it? So for us, the method of getting nice feelings is get the cake, get the body, get the rock and roll. That's our method, isn't it? Would you agree?
Yes.
So another way of putting it, would you also agree, we don't really know how to access pleasant feelings unless we get an object. Would you agree with that? Generally speaking.
Well, I have to meditate on
No. Okay, generally speaking, the day is spent trying to get pleasant sensory experiences which trigger good feelings. Like if you're sitting in the chair and it's slightly uncomfortable, what will you do?
Change my position.
Thank you, because you want a good feeling. If you're really tired, you'll go to bed because you've got unhappy feelings. If you're really hungry, you'll put food in the mouth. You understand my point? So I'm always searching for that thing out there that we believe is the cause of good feelings. Would you agree that's our philosophy? Generally
Yes,
speaking.
yes.
Good, okay. Buddha says there's nothing wrong with good feelings, sweetie pie. I want you to have good feelings, he says. But he's saying the way we are at the moment, we don't realise it, is the method we use to trigger good feelings is the method of a junkie. We will only get good feelings if we get the fix. And if your senses don't have some objects for a whole day, you'd have a mental breakdown, I think. If you had no sensory input for any of your 5 senses for one day, I think we'd go mad.
I understand.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, let's look at Buddha's explanation of this. He says, actually, Robina, what's your name again? Amit, you got it wrong, babe. I want you to be happy. Please, everyone's got the potential to be happy. You can't believe how happy. I want you to be happy. But all he's suggesting is that the methods we use are faulty because we've got attachment and this is making a mess. So let me explain. He says good feelings, happiness, are the result of you doing a virtuous action which leaves a seed in your mind and that will ripen in the future, not immediately. That seed will ripen in the future as a nice feeling. That's called happiness. So Buddha simply says virtue brings happiness, non-virtue brings suffering. Not immediately necessarily, but he says if you accumulate lots of virtuous seeds called morality, for example, non-killing. If you spend a life called non-killing, next life you will have very pleasant experiences. You'll have a really good human body. You'll have really pleasant environment where no one's trying to kill you. You'll live a long life. Food will be delicious. You'll have a healthy body. That's the fruit, literally, those good feelings, which we think are caused by that cake now, but they're actually from the seeds you planted in many lives ago from being moral and good. But we don't know that. And we've got all these seeds in our little bank. But the only way we can access those moments of pleasure is by getting a cake or getting a body or hearing rock and roll.
Or smelling a flower.
You're not hearing me. You're not hearing. You missed the point. You just missed the whole thing. It's okay. It's a subtle point. It's all right. Did you hear what I said or not? I don't think you did.
Yes, I did.
What did I say?
To repeat what you
Yes,
said.
briefly, the last 2 sentences. So I understand we're communicating.
I'll try to summarize it. Speaking on the non-killing, it will forecast in a better being in our next life.
And what's the experience that non-killing will bring? What's it
It
called?
will bring us a better health, better body.
It's called happiness. It's called happy. It's called happy feelings.
Happy feeling.
Go on then. But what's our mistake? You see? No, that's right. Exactly. Okay. Let me listen. Let me just. Okay. When we in this life are born with a healthy body, we get good feelings. Because you don't have, when you eat the food, you don't vomit and things, isn't it? So we assume, I'm happy because I've got a healthy body. Do you accept that? I'm happy when I eat good food. Would you accept that? Yes. I'm happy when I have a really good girlfriend, have incredible sex or whatever it is you like, Yes. It triggers very good feelings. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Okay. The Buddha says, no, you're wrong. You've got a good body, which brings you pleasure because you created virtue. So what causes happiness isn't a good body. What causes happiness is virtue. What causes you to even have a bank load of good seeds that are triggered by having a nice girlfriend. You've got those seeds in there because you were virtuous in the past. So we make the mistake of thinking that a really delicious girl causes good feelings. No, she's only the trigger. She's like a key that opens your bank vault of good feelings, and then the good feelings all pop up. The actual cause of good feelings is your past virtue. Your actual cause of good feelings is virtue. So if you believe it's getting girls, that's what attachment thinks. Your attachment over-exaggerates a delicious girl. You've got this bank load of good seeds in there, which are very good feelings, but we don't know how to experience them unless we have the girl. They're in there locked. Because we are junkies that believe objects of the senses cause good feelings. Now the fisherman who's attached to fishing, he gets really good feelings. He doesn't realise that the good feelings he's having when he does the killing is not caused by killing, it's caused by his past virtue. But he can only access those good feelings by fishing. And so what that does is, in the end, what it does is, you believe that girls cause happiness, so you have pleasure with a girl, you have those imprints in your mind, you have those feelings in your bank vault. Put it this way, if you didn't have any good feelings from past virtue, having a girl wouldn't give you pleasure. Eating food wouldn't give you pleasure. Let's say you have headaches all day. That's because you're activating every day your non-virtuous seeds from killing, so that every time you do anything you've got a headache, so you'll never get any pleasure. No matter how many girls, no matter how many pieces of cake you have. You only have suffering because your non-virtue is ripening. When non-virtue ripens, we have suffering. When virtue ripens, we have happiness. But we don't know how to access those virtuous feelings unless we get an object. So then what happens is, because it's attachment that craves it, that we end up putting, I've got to swear here, pissing it down the toilet. Because attachment makes you a junkie, and then you will kill and lie and steal to get more pleasure because you don't know how to get pleasure. So Buddha says, I've got a method for you. Because the happiness you're triggering now is short term. You know yourself, don't you, that if you keep eating cake, you'd vomit and die, wouldn't you? If you keep having sex with the nicest girl on earth, you'd vomit and die. Don't like to think that way, do we? But get my point. Because as long as you have constant contact with that object, it'll eventually cause you terrible suffering. So Buddha says this happiness we have is short term because it doesn't last. It turns into terrible suffering. But we don't know how else to trigger pleasure. So Buddha says, I've got a method for you. Give up attachment completely, get some meditation skill, and you will access your subtle mind, which is already blissful. And then you can eventually retain that ability. When you've got rid of all delusions, your mind will be so blissful you will never know anything like it. And that will never change because it's not coming from an external object, and it will never change into suffering.
Would that be referred to?
Hang on, just a sec. Hang on. Can you hear or not?
I think that
A little bit.
I think that I understand. I'm not sure that I understand why sex has this honorable place. Why sex has this honorable place.
Honourable?
Yes, while we have all the senses.
Darling, it's only because but that's easy enough, because it's obviously because the one that triggers the best feelings, that's all.
Oh.
It triggers the best feelings, isn't it? Well, unless you're a torturer. They got those feelings when they torture, so it depends on your habits, unfortunately, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, it depends. Some people,
Yes.
get like girl shapes. Boys like girl, they get all those pleasure when they have a girl, but there are some people called furries. Have you heard about them? You haven't heard about furries? You just got to read the news. I read the news, They're people, a lot of them these days, they've found each other on the internet, who meet together in their hotels, they have all their conferences, and their addiction is having sex with their stuffed toys.
Oh.
They identify with being animals, by being toys. And they get dressed up like in toys, and they prefer to have... One boy I saw in the interview, he spends all his money on eBay on stuffed toys, and he has sex with his stuffed toys. They turn him on. So an ordinary old-fashioned little boy, his little penis will stand up when he sees a girl shape. The torturer, his penis will stand up when he tortures people because he's been an animal in the past. Fishermen will get pleasure, maybe their little thing doesn't stand up and they get real pleasure. So whatever it is you've got the habit to do, it triggers pleasure. Sex is obviously the one that goes to the deepest one. It's the most intense pleasure, that's all it is. The most intense pleasure, that's all it is.
So theoretically, it should be custom made. I mean, I should avoid sex.
But you should
Somebody else
avoid
should
it.
avoid- somebody
Buddha
else-
doesn't say you
somebody-
should avoid
Wait,
Somebody
relax.
else should
No, you got it wrong. Definitely you should give up sex. You want to get enlightened, no question. But I won't shock you, but I'll go into it in more detail in a minute. Excuse me, please, let me go on a second. Let him, and then I'll get to your point. It's a really good point. Please, I will get to it, I promise. Let him finish his trip.
It sounds like it has to be custom made. I should avoid sex, somebody else should avoid torturing dolls, the other one should avoid whatever giving pleasure.
Precisely. So the point, though, I'm getting at here, the one we discussed with karma, due to past habits, we're all born with attachment, okay? As long as we're in samsara, we have attachment with this bottomless pit of craving to get good feelings. And we all, because of past karma, we have different methods of doing that. So a common old-fashioned one to trigger what we call sexual pleasure is, a boy and a girl come together and their organs meet and they do trips and then pleasure comes, all right? That's the old-fashioned, and that's You understand my point? So, but we can see, although we don't like to think about it, torturers. I remember reading about one torturer, killed many people, and he said he called it sexual pleasure, which he meant very intense pleasure. So that sounds disgusting to us that we don't want to think about it. But taking the Buddha's view, pleasure is simply certain things happening in your body with your mind together that trigger that is very good feelings. And in Tantra they describe in great detail the technicalities of what is going on, the physiology of it, okay? So, a person who's got an addiction to fishing from killing in the past will be born in this life and will be super attracted to fishing. Another person will be super attracted to food. Another one is super attracted to girls or to whatever it might be, due to habits, okay? But we've all got attachment. So the point is, Buddha's saying attachment is the cause of the problem. It's hard to see this in a world that is literally constructed by attachment. So when we, and because also we have, the culture is, okay, now it's variations of genders and people with penises meet people with penises and all that. You understand my point here? Different people, but kind of the human body, we can see there's this thing that's a dangly thing that gets hard and goes into a hole. Excuse me being blunt. But we karmically have created this over eons of time, Buddha says, and it's the product of our attachment. We have caused ourselves to have different shapes and forms. We have caused ourselves to have to join together to trigger nice feelings. It's called sex, but we have made it all. So it's also the method we use to get born on this earth. So we've created a culture called marriage and this kind of thing, and parenthood and blah, blah, blah. So it's part of our world. We can see this, So in the long term, yes, if you want to get to the subtle level of your mind through meditation, even that, it is impossible to do it unless you give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and go to the mountains. I mean, literally impossible, because you need to meditate all day, every day, have no distractions, no other things to do, no needs to fulfill except to get to your subtle mind. So even to do that in order to get some realizations, of course you've got to give it up. And food as well, best really. Not for any moralistic reason, but for a practical reason, You can't do both. So in the long term, eventually, if you're on the Bodhisattva path, where in a sense you've got so advanced, now you choose to get reborn even though you don't need to be, but that assumes you've already given up attachment. So you'll happily have 62 wives, it won't matter, or 47 boyfriends, because you're not in the thrall of attachment any longer, and you're only full of compassion and love for others. That's the best time. That's where you can have your cake and eat it too. You understand my point? But in the earlier stages of practice, if we're addicted. Not everybody to sex, not everybody to food. We've got one or other variations, like you said, going to be tailor-made for us, Because the craving is what... Because you see, if you just don't get even sensory contact for one day, we'd go mad, because we're us sensory beings. So the point, though, is this, again, to say, and it's not like a technical point. Buddha's saying, virtue in the past is what causes us in the present to even have a pleasant body, to even have food that's delicious, that triggers, not causes, good feelings. The good feeling is from, you've got a bank of it from the past of being virtuous. Do you hear this point? You've got a bank of virtuous seeds. So the only way we know how to trigger the good feelings, because we've got a gross body, is to put food in the mouth, which triggers those good feelings and brings them up. But it won't last. I don't know how to sustain pleasure and joy without getting the sensory objects. So the Buddha's saying, we say, happiness is what we get when we get what attachment wants. The only way we know how to do it. But he says, no. If you give up attachment, the way to get happiness for the Buddha, which means lots of good feelings all the time, permanently, and far more pure and blissful and radiant and marvellous and mixed with compassion and wisdom, to trigger really good feelings constantly, give up attachment. So it's sort of like the difference between the happiness of a junkie and the happiness of the person who's given up being a junkie. The person who's given up being a junkie is content and kind of fulfilled. It looks kind of boring. We'd rather have the up and down yo-yo kind of happiness, all the dramas and the craving. You understand my point? The pleasure is the same, but we use mucky methods to trigger pleasure, and then it doesn't last. We've got to keep doing it, and then we get more craving, and then we harm each other because we don't get what we want, and we get upset, and we hurt people, and all the rest, because it makes us crazy. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
So, of course, we be reasonable in our lives. We be reasonable. Yeah.
I can give an example of how, for me, it works
Tell me. Yeah.
with a cigarette.
Yeah.
You get the pleasure, but it's a wrong pleasure.
Or he's going to give a tea. I didn't mean to give a teaching, Vasily, but go on, you're allowed to give a teaching. I'll have my tea while you give a teaching. Don't explain it. I mean, no, listen.
Measurement in the cigarette user.
Vasily, maybe it's best to leave it. He understands. It's okay. Talk to him privately. What else? Thank you. I'm glad you understand. Excuse me. I'm extremely rude, aren't I? Yes, anybody else?
Ultimately, if we're going to give up the attachment, is it going to take us thousands of lifetimes?
Yeah, you work really hard. You
To
might.
get to
Yeah. So, but there's ways of sort of shortcutting it. This is okay. If you're just going to do junior school, that's the Theravada path. So you have the image of monks walking slowly, being mindful, having one meal. There's no wiggle room. There's the only way to do it. But this is where the Bodhisattva path and the Tantric path would sort of like we lazy people think, oh, I'm a Mahayana practitioner. I don't need to do that. It's a load of rubbish. You've got to. But there are methods of being skillful, of bringing in compassion and bodhicitta into your daily life. So, for example, according to the Theravada level, or the first stages of practice, the only way to eat your food is to think it's caca. Because otherwise, you can just get attached. You're just increasing attachment. But in the Bodhisattva path, if you think like we've been doing, a few virtuous thoughts first, and then try and see it as empty, then you manage to have your food as well. So you're putting virtue on top of the attachment. You're lessening the attachment. You're growing new virtuous thoughts. If every day you think, I'm going to eat to be beneficial to others, eventually that'll become your really reason for eating. You understand my point? It's a way of short-circuiting it. Are you understanding me?
Yeah, well,
Right.
that's why the guy asked you, how do you do this quicker?
He didn't ask me, it was asked Dalai Lama. Yeah, he just wasn't being lazy though. He just wanted a quick path. He couldn't go the slow path. But it's based on understanding the first one anyway. What else, people? Siki, had your hand up?
Yeah, a few things. I will choose one. It seems like our motive, basically, is the motive to develop. Of every
Sorry,
development.
I have to stop you.
Yeah.
What do you mean our? Who's this our you're talking about?
Anyone, never mind the development level of each individual, sentient being, okay?
You mean all sentient beings?
All sentient beings
You mean all sentient beings want to
are
develop?
motivated by something. It's an attachment, okay?
Well, that's attachment, that's delusion. I agree with you.
Pleasure.
It's
but
delusion.
eventually-
But it's attachment is what makes us do it. This craving to be satisfied every millisecond is what drives us like a motor. Buddha would suggest that's what being in samsara means, and that's the cause of all the problems.
Yeah, but eventually what brought us all here?
No, I would suggest that's not accurate. Siki, may I give my reasoning why that's not accurate? Okay, if I keep following attachment, and keep therefore following anger and depression and jealousy and lying and stealing and killing, I will be born as an animal, straight away, right there. So forget enlightenment for a few eons, darling. Or I'll get born as a spirit or a hell being. When the Buddha would say the vast majority of suffering sentient beings are right now, most humans are again swearing, pissing their life down the toilet by following aggression, following misery, following depression. So I would say that does not bring us here eventually. What brings us here eventually is phenomenal hard work from many past lives that we're born in the first place with imprints of morality and imprints to wish to practice a spiritual path. We would blow our minds if we realised how hard we work at morality and goodness and struggle to be good people. That's the cause of being in this room. I would say not following attachment. It's not a natural given that most people will get to this. No way in the world. How could you think so?
Well, my view of sentient beings, and for sure humans, is, I don't know, optimistic.
What?
I feel they
Who?
have the urge
Domestic?
to get better.
Excuse me, Siki, I think that's... Excuse me, have you not... I'm not trying to be mean about us sentient beings. Have you not noticed people kill, lie, steal, cheat, terrorise? Excuse me, no, please wait. Is that true or not? How can you say they're trying to get better? I'm feeling sorry for them. But how can you say killing and lying and stealing is trying to get better, Siki? What are you talking about?
But they have a whole variety of conducts. They kill, but they not only kill.
But then I'm sorry, the negative ones are more powerful because they drive us more easily. Have you not noticed, Siki, if someone comes along and smashes you in the face, what is likely to arise instantaneously is fear and panic and probably the wish to hit back. Even forget that. Just someone looks mean at you. We're going to get upset, we worry. I mean, we think about I'm no good, I'm blah, blah, blah. I mean, look how easy it is when we feel a little bit miserable, you know. 27 people can say, you're a really nice guy, Tiki. No, I'm not. Most people are like that. Unless you're a special being of your own with high realizations, in which case you'd already understand what I'm saying, and you'd have compassion for me. think your view is naive. I think it's very nice of you to have that view. I don't think it's true. And it's not, it's looking at my own mind, okay? Seeing how hard it is every millisecond to be virtuous, to see things as empty, to understand the view of karma, to not follow attachment, to not follow laziness, to not follow wanting to... I mean, I think it's enormously difficult to really have pure virtuous thoughts every second. Forget it, because most of the time they're not. And if I've got these strong habits and you just follow them naturally, you don't even know they're negative. Most people don't even know it's negative to get angry or to badmouth their auntie. Forget killing and raping. It's not trying to be mean about people. I think it's seeing the nature of our little mind, ourselves. Maybe, I don't know, maybe your mind's purer than most or something.
Like, again, in this endless continuum of beginningless, endless, eons of lifetimes,
Yeah, then?
also suffering gets very small. Okay,
What? Sorry, what?
So what's the drama about suffering and dying and killing? It's not that I'm saying it's good to harm.
So what's your point then?
The point is that my optimistic view comes also from diminishing the drama in harming others. Okay, so you harm
So
others.
I'm really losing you, Tiki. What? I'm sorry, I don't understand you. What are you saying?
There is, like, in a way, in this framework that you suggest, which is endless to both directions, you dramatize suffering.
Sorry, who was dramatizing suffering? Sorry, wait.
The way the
Buddha is dramatizing. So, okay, well, the Buddha would suggest you haven't got a clue what suffering is then, because your view sounds stunningly cynical. Like, why does it matter? I mean, all I can say is, I can only quote from the people, let's say, I know who are said to have these realizations of compassion. For example, Lama Zopa, he never sleeps, for example. They say because for him to sleep, for him, because he's a great yogi who has realized emptiness, has no longer ego, and has infinite compassion for sentient beings, this, for sleep, for example, for him would be considered a disgusting waste of time, living in ignorance and not taking care of others. In other words, there's a level of compassion that even when I hear about it now, even when I see examples of it, I almost don't believe it's possible. So all I can say is within that, then I can see my limited view of it. And that to actually say we're dramatising suffering, then I just think that points, I'm being very direct here, unbelievable ignorance, Siki. Means you don't know your own suffering. May I suggest, being very blunt? Dramatise suffering? Jesus wept. Have you seen this world? Have you seen the raping and the murdering and the torture? Not to mention hell realms and spirits and animals. You see animals every day, but the Buddha would say you don't know their suffering. That shows our incredible ignorance. So all I'm suggesting is, if Buddha's right, his view of suffering is way more subtle than we think. You don't have to accept that, but I'm just saying from Buddha's perspective, being my usual blunt self.
And something else.
Dramatise suffering. God in heaven. Siki, that's a terrible thing to say. Dramatise. I mean, someone's going to come along and rape your wife and cut her to pieces. Oh, Siki, don't dramatise suffering. She just got raped. In the big picture, it doesn't matter. I don't think you'd say that, darling. Shush, wait, please. Would you say that? I don't think so. Well, then be careful. Dramatise suffering. God in heaven. So, look a bit deeper, perhaps. Yes, what do you want to say? Give a lecture. What do you want? Don't give him a talk. Talk to me. Excuse me. Talk to me, Vasily.
Yes, I mean, we have to say suffering is not only about killing, raping.
Okay, here we go. You can't open. He's already giving lectures. Shush. You're unbelievable. Shush.
No, suffering is also depression. Also,
Vasily, I don't need you to give a teaching in this room. I've already said this the entire 4 days, if you haven't noticed, so why do you have to think I have to reiterate it? I'm saying to him what I want. Be quiet. Whew. Whew. I had this fellow recently. I mean, excuse me. He doesn't even think he's doing anything wrong.
We hope you come again to Greece.
Because it's very
It's been a great experience for you.
He's not ready for that subtler level, do you see, Vasily? You already understand it, darling. So be quiet. We nearly finished. I better go home, I think. What do you want to say now? Yes? Who had a hand up? What, darling?
You were talking about 11 steps.
Oh, the compassion one, yeah.
Compassion,
Yeah.
and we were talking only about 4 or 5.
I mentioned 4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah. You said you maybe tell us.
No, I won't do the rest. They're in books. I'll send you a teaching. I'll add the teaching
Okay.
to this book. This note that he's going to send everybody so kindly. Tiki. Who keeps inviting me? Who keeps inviting me, nevertheless. I've done it about 2017, but I'll get an invitation for them. We'll see. Next time I'm in Europe. Yes, Melanie.
Why is the power of chanting and prayer
Yes.
so powerful?
Is it? Is it more powerful?
Well, all the religions, philosophies
Do
seem
it.
to do it. Buddhists do it.
Well, there's something about sound. I don't know. I know that when I go to prisons, for example, when I go to prisons where they don't have very nice sounds, they're abused constantly with sounds and things. And all I know is whenever I sing a prayer, or just a nice tune maybe, they're kind of in tears practically. You know? So there's something very healing. I mean, just nice, pleasing sounds.
Isn't it that they've been repeated over time and they have...
I think all that part too, but I think on the simplest level, just pleasing sounds, it's kind of uplifting, don't you think? Then of course, all the Buddhists would say the mantras, over a long time, building up this energy of compassion and energy of, and because it's so linked to the wind energy, and it's also coming from a pure mind. There's something about all that combination, you know? Or even just words. One of the things they say, like I mentioned in the meditation, the power of speech. They say.
Yeah.
So you could have let's say you could say, you know, play a recording of Bach playing music. Okay, we haven't got a recording. But I think if you're in his presence, hearing Bach directly, it's far more powerful because of the power of his own mind. You know, the realizations are much more powerful. People, when they go to the Dalai Lama's teachings, he's said to be a Buddha. I don't know if he is. They say he is, you know. If he's a Buddha, then I can say the same words as the Dalai Lama, but when he says them, somehow there's much more power because it's coming from genuine experience. So maybe any sound, if it's coming from real experience. Conversely, if you hear ridiculous words coming out of some idiot's mouth, endlessly talking, sounds like me, then, you know, you've got to shut up, please, go away, you know. And especially a lot of speech, you know, this is where speech is very powerful. Often we just say what we feel, you know. And we're not really sure if it's true. We're speculating a lot. We're giving all our ideas. You can sort of hear it. You know, oh, come on, be quiet, please. It's got blur, 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 you know. But if speech is clear and it's in whatever system you're learning, even if it's truthful, it's kind of interesting and tasty and can move us. Speech can move us, you know. So I don't know. I think that seems reasonable.
It doesn't have something to do with what Siki was getting to before.
Which is what?
Connecting into a higher power, I guess, if you like a Christian would pray to God or sing hymns to God and they get relief.
I understand.
I mean, who are you chanting to? What
Nobody. Not necessarily. Prayers in Buddhism, most of them are aspirations. So that prayer we sing is saying, it's reminding me that I'm relying upon Buddha and his teachings, and I'm going to listen to these teachings so that I can become a Buddha, so I can benefit sentient beings. It's stating my purpose. It's like aspirational. A lot of the prayers we say are aspirational. My thoughts, you know, and they can be very poetic and very beautiful because nice sounds lift the heart. You know, many of the prayers are related directly to the Buddhas to connect with, but not as a creator. You know, but more as a person, you know, whom I want to become like. So it's reminding us, you know, triggering those experiences in me. Yeah. But many of the prayers, when they're beautiful and poetic and sweet and rhythmic, it touches the heart. Words are very powerful, I think, aren't they? Yeah.
I will try to explain it in English. Sorry, because I'm not speaking very well. About prayer.
Yes.
Sometimes I imagine it like we have a piece of metal and a strong magnet. When the metal goes near to the magnet, the atoms gets in order. And if we keep it a long time, the piece of metal becomes a magnet. Sometimes I feel like prayers are giving order to our thoughts and our wisdom like a piece of magnet.
Okay, very nice.
They gave us power.
Good, very nice. Good, very nice. Thank you. Very nice. What else, folks?
Can I do anything now?
I mean,
What, darling?
Can I I understand what you're going for. I really believe that I understand the reason of why you avoid. Now about the practice.
Yes, darling.
I remember, can I make a very short story? I remember traveling with a very Jewish, but very religion one, into a big city a few years ago, and all he could think was about the prohibited part of the city, the red light district.
Of course, yes.
Now, I'll put it in question.
Yes.
Why don't we just, sex for example, or
Yes.
any other
Yes,
thing,
yes.
have it until it's non-issue anymore?
I understand.
Why should we
I understand.
avoid
I understand.
whatever
Yes, I
and just
understand.
keep it in our own mind?
I understand. The only reason to avoid something is if it causes suffering.
Yes.
The only reason to avoid something, it's not moralistic, it's not because God said, it's not because it's naughty, it's not because you shouldn't do it, which is all the view we have of religion. It's not a question of that. It's a question of the only reason to avoid something, mentally or verbally or physically, if it harms you or others. So if it doesn't harm you, well then darling, go and have it as much as you like. It's up to you to discover what harms you and what not. So that's all. So Buddha would suggest that attachment causes great suffering, and therefore suffering to others as well. That's up to us to see if he's right. Maybe he's right. Maybe we're making a big drama about suffering. That's for us to discover. It's not a fundamentalist issue. So if a person who doesn't have any attachment, you know, you could go to the red light district and take all the clothes off all the naked ladies and have fun and have a party. It wouldn't disturb your mind. You'll see there's nice human beings there. But if you've got a lot of drama inside your own mind and scared of sex and attachment, you'll have a panic attack. And you'll probably be like all those ridiculous chaplains who secretly go around having sex with the prostitutes and then give a lecture on Sunday how you shouldn't.
Yes.
That's the neurosis about it.
Yes.
So if there's no neurosis, then don't worry about it, you know.
Go on, that's it.
So if there's no, that's why we have to look ourselves and be responsible. So when I'm rudely suggesting to Tsiki, Buddha might be making a big drama about suffering, but it's up to him to find out. And all the Buddha would say is once you start to see your own suffering, then it becomes unbearable to see suffering of others because we can see how terrible it is. And it is being very rude to Tsiki to say that, you know. He's being a very...
sharpen it, my intention.
What, darling?
Maybe I did not express my meaning right.
No, I know, you were saying, and I understand that thought, you were saying, given that we've got beginningless and endless, why make all this drama about suffering? We'll all end up enlightened anyway.
Not only that, when you realize, whatever you realize, you don't suffer.
What?
You don't.
Realise what?
When you become fully realized, okay, you
That's right.
stop your own suffering.
Yes.
And you're not suffering from others' suffering.
I know that, so what are you telling me? So why are you telling me this?
Because if you bear this in mind even before you're fully realized,
Bear what in mind, darling?
the fact that you do not take upon you unnecessary suffering.
But who's suggesting you should do that? What are you saying?
I'm saying simply that avoiding suffering is a very rational, it's the only rational option to work with, as far as I can see it. It's not useful, you're not enjoying it, there's no use to suffer. And you try to minimize your suffering. On this process, you realize, as the suffering diminishes, slowly, in a bit, not fully realized yet.
So then?
Then also the suffering of others become like you could see how this could be minimized as you minimize yours.
So
and how pointless it is and how...
But what was it? Okay, so now we're getting to the... Good, Tsiki, I hear you. So what would be, once you, using the Buddhist view, once you've gone beyond your own suffering, you realise emptiness and you've rid of delusions and you're full of bliss and clarity, and now you're going to have compassion. So what's compassion as you understand it? How would you think of what compassion is?
Realizing how others can become free of suffering?
No, compassion. So you think that's what compassion is?
Yes.
What's
And-
real? You mean so?
and-
Huh? So compassion is not empathy with other people's suffering? Seeing how they're suffering and seeing how they're suffering because of their ignorance and...
Yeah.
Okay, so that's compassion. So how would you be if you were compassionate? How would you live your life if you had pure compassion?
Well, you live without suffering and you contact others offering them the same key of yours.
So how would you be in a person? How would you be as a person? How would a person be if they were like that? Try and express how that person would be. Well, I'll tell you. The ones I know, and the ones I hear, they never sleep, They unbelievable, incredible affection and devotion and affection and incredible compassion. Their hearts are breaking like for their most precious children. It's not affecting them. They're not dragged down. Their minds are in bliss, but they see the unbearableness of the suffering of sentient beings. All I can do is quote you the way they talk in the Buddhist teachings of the Bodhisattva's compassion that is beyond bearing, such to the point that they, like Harry, would give their life for another. They would cut their hand off for the starving animal because their compassion for that being is stupendous. For that level of compassion, I think, isn't conveyed by what you're saying. And I understand that, but maybe if you can consider that that level of compassion is possible, and that is what Buddha would say when your mind is really free, so then, as opposed to dramatising suffering, they would say it is beyond bearing, so you have no choice but to never give up being born and born for countless eons, because your job is to help them remove suffering. So I don't know, all I know is I can think of compassion. When I hear, when I hear my teacher talk about compassion, for me it's way in the sky. I can only imagine it, you know. So I can't even conceive. I can quote you from what I've read and seen the levels of compassion they have. That it's not like you said, dramatised compassion. That sounds pretty cruel. Because when you've got bliss, which seems contradictory, because if you're really in the state of bliss, you'd think, how can you be suffering? How can you see suffering? But you see even more. And then and they say that's what a bodhisattva is a person who's got this personal responsibility that if they don't do it, who will? And all I can tell you is when I hear the Dalai Lama and I hear people in this system that I know, my people, my teachers, talk about it, you get some sense that they know about it and that they're stupendous and outrageous. And then when you see their lives, like Lama Zopa literally never sleeps. Literally never sleeps. It will be disgusting beyond, it's like while your daughter is dying, you're sleeping. That's the level of responsibility these bodhisattvas have. I find it exhausting to hear about it. Okay, I'm communicating a bit. Just thought, food for thought. Yeah. I've got a feeling we're done. We're cooked. We're finished.
Definitely cook.
So let me just summarise what we're talking about. All the three, junior school. First step, recognise that your behaviour harms others. First one, some of it, not all of it, some of it, you know. And that's driven by delusions, attachment, neediness, anger, therefore hurt and fears and rubbish. So the first level of practice, entry level, junior school. Back off, Robina. Leave sentient beings alone. Give them a break. Don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, a few little things. And then you can extrapolate from this, for your own sake, don't do those things. But also, you know, maybe that also says, harness the energy of your behaviour, again, for your own sake. Calm your body down, calm your speech down. And then purify your negative karma, like we talked. And then this is sort of sowing the seeds, Buddha would say. You're setting yourself up for the next life. When you die today or die in a year's time or 20 years, doesn't matter. You're ready, because we're in charge of our life. That's junior school, already incredible. Now you can go to high school, you can start to meditate, start to learn how to meditate, learn the skills, the technical skills, then learn the Buddhist model of the mind. We're talking the Buddhist approach here. How the delusions work, the ego grasping, the attachment, all the others, and the relationship between them. And how they are the source of why the world does harmful things to each other. So you start to harness the energy of your mind, which is the real job. Now you're kind of so together, and the consequence of this, it is the harnessing of your body, speech and mind. It's the harnessing of your sexual energy, this one, the ones that you're attached to and crave and get upset if you don't have, which is really hard work. Following the delusions is very typical for us. So to harness all this doesn't make you a miserable person. The person you become already with this will be very blissful, very content, very fulfilled. You wouldn't be a victim. You wouldn't get angry. You wouldn't get depressed. You wouldn't get jealous. You'd be an incredible person, very blissful, very relaxed, very content. So now because the delusions are gone to some extent, you can see others more and more clearly. You're in this boat together. The wisdom bringer is kind of like the retreat mode. Now you come down from the mountain and oh my God, in the chaos and the nightmare of all the suffering sentient beings, locked in their suffering, mainly such compassion for them because they don't know they're causing their own suffering. That's the worst tragedy. We're looking everywhere else for our happiness except here. We're looking everywhere else for the causes of suffering except here, you know. That's the thing that perpetuates it. So then you're more and more working on your mind, equanimity, all these other practices, Tonglen, bodhicitta, and then continue to practice even more. There's more to go, you know. Until eventually you perfected the two wings. Yes, a few lifetimes, but one step at a time, one step at a time. Take the methods of work, one step at a time, one step at a time. That was the essence of what we've been talking about.
So you shouldn't feel bad that it's going to take a long time.
Sweetheart, it's like, in that sense, I will say, we're beginning as endless anyway, so, what else to
Doesn't
do?
matter.
What else to do? It does. They say the great bodhisattvas have an incredible sense of urgency. Not just laid back, because their compassion is so enormous. I'm just telling you what they say, Tiki, I mean, I like my 8 hours of sleep a day. Just the thought of finding sleep disgusting makes me tired. So when I think of Lama Zopa, who sits there perky all night meditating, getting his realizations, and probably these great bodhisattvas bopping around manifesting in different bodies because they're capable of doing that. So, let's take as long as it takes. So having some confidence, not being drama queens, not getting guilty, none of that, that's all rubbish, Just keep having system, having a method, having a map, and that's up to us to find the map that works for us. And then, and part of a lot of contentment coming from having a map. Much of the time, I think, with spiritual practices, we don't have a system. We don't have a goal, we don't have a map. We're never quite sure where we're going. With maths and with music, you've got a map, you know where you're going, you feel quite content, even though it's going to take you 20 years. You sort of see what I'm saying. We've got a system, you see where you're going. But often with spiritual, we don't have a feeling we have a map. And I find this, for me, the Buddhist one, there's a structure, a map. So once you're on a map, even if it's 10,000 miles, you don't mind. As long as you're taking the right turn every time, you'll get there eventually. So you can relax in that sense. In that sense, you can relax. Part of the fear we have is we never know where we are. It's like even though your goal's a mile away, you don't ever know where you are. That's often why we're suffering. But having a map, I find that very consoling. Okay, I've chosen this map. Do you understand my point? So just keep following the system. Check the methods. Oh, what do they do? Yeah, okay, I'll do this one. What's next? Okay. That I find very helpful. Just keep moving. One step at a time. Rejoicing in your progress. Rejoicing in your progress, Go on. What
So
time?
for the people that don't pursue this in as rigorous a way as someone who chooses to be a monk,
Darling, no.
They're integrating practice in their daily...
Sweetheart, everybody does what they have to do. Clearly, you got your Lance Armstrongs of cycling. Okay, he's a naughty man now, I know that. But, you've got your Lance Armstrongs, then you have your weekend cyclists. But each of us does it according to our pace. And it doesn't follow because a person's a monk or a nun that they're doing better. It's just they've got the karma to not want to have a relationship. They've got a karma to be monk or nun. It doesn't follow they're more progress. It doesn't follow they're more advanced. Not at all. It doesn't follow. If you're a bodhisattva path, it doesn't follow at all. Each person's different. So don't worry about that part. You do where you're at yourself, or you're on your own road. You can't be further, you can't be less. You've got to see where you are, get your perspective, know where you're going, and just keep moving. And delight in our progress, and be happy for ourselves, and rejoice. It's so important, that one. One step at a time. I love that saying that our grandma said, you pave your way. It's so profound. You do each day well, the next day will be good. Each day, and then you deal with the obstacles when they come, Just, here's my obstacle. Get it out of the way. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing else. What else to do with it?
It's like having a compass pointing to
There you
the
go.
north all
Sure.
the time.
That's
All you have to do is follow it.
That's right. Whatever map you have. Each of us, many of you might like the Buddhist one, you might not. That's your call, But have the integrity to check, have the courage to make your choices. Don't be afraid of anything. Look into things, keep your mind open. Don't be fearful, don't be lazy. Keep checking, keep looking, keep questioning, and make choices, This is all we can do, isn't it? I think we should finish. What do you think? Enough?
Yes.
Without any more abuse coming out the mouth, I better be quiet. Okay, so I want to say a couple of little prayers here. These are these aspirations of the Bodhisattva. This is coming from Shantideva, this 8th century great scholar and saint and yogi whose teachings they still study in all the monasteries in Tibet. Let me just say these words, Lama Zopa's translation of these few little verses from this particular person called Shantideva, and the Dalai Lama chose these verses. Lama Zopa translated, he's got most unusual English, you'll see, but he translated just as our dedication, right? Our positive dedication, from the Bodhisattva path. From the Bodhisattva path. Where are we? Here we go. Okay. Just make these thoughts yours, if they make sense. So determine, there's different verses here from different things, but they're all related to bodhicitta, compassion. So determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will hold them most dear at all times. May I become a wish-granting jewel, fulfilling all the wishes, and a wish-granting tree, fulfilling all the hopes of sentient beings. For the sake of completing the welfare of all sentient beings without any sense of loss, I give up my body, enjoyments and wealth, as well as all virtues of the 3 tones. By renouncing all, go beyond suffering, my mind achieves the non-abiding, sorrowless state, enlightenment. And once I gave up altogether, it's best to give away all for sentient beings. I give up this body as comfortably as they want, to all the sentient beings, however is comfortable for them to use. Whether they kill me, criticise, beat, or so forth, they may do whatever they like. These are the outrageous thoughts, actually, of the Bodhisattva. So totally you feel your life is for others, they can do what they like. They eat you for breakfast, they don't mind. Sentient beings play with my body, ridicule and make fun of me. As I've already given it to them, why do I go against this? Let the sentient beings be allowed to do any action that doesn't do harm to them. Whoever encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them. Just by looking at me, anyone who gets angry or has devotional thoughts arise for me, may that alone become the cause to accomplish all the welfare of those living beings. Any being who criticises me, puts me down, or anyone who gives harm, even making fun of me behind my back, may all become fortunate to achieve great enlightenment. All this level of bodhicitta, which we didn't talk about, is the level where it's like exchanging for others, where you learn to completely go against the normal ego. You go to the opposite. Anger, people being mean to you is good. Problems come, it's good. Unhappiness come, it's good. It's like insane, It's like smashing ego at the root. May I become a saviour for those who are guideless, a guide for those who enter the road, a boat, a ship, a bridge for those who wish to cross over a great river to the dry land. May I be an island for those seeking an island, a light for those desiring light, bedding for those desiring a place to rest. Sentient beings who desire a slave, may I become a slave for all. May I become a wish-granting jewel, a wish-fulfilling vase, powerful mantra and great medicine, a wish-fulfilling tree, a wish-granting cow for those sentient beings. May I become the great elements, the earth, and like the forever boundless sky, may I become the cause of living of the innumerable sentient beings. So like that, towards the realms of sentient beings who equal the limit of the sky, may I become a cause of living always, until the non-abiding, sorrowless state is achieved. As long as space exists, as long as sentient beings exist, may I too abide and eliminate the sufferings of sentient beings. Okay. Slowly, slowly. Thank you, everybody. Very much. Okay. Thank you, Tiggy.
Thank you.
All right. See you whenever.
Have a good journey.